Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. The first thing that I will say is that we're really happy and truly delighted to be hosting these sessions this week at Rapyd's office as part of the Singapore Fintech Festival. And actually having a physical audience with us this week in the office, of course, following all safety guidelines. It's the first time that we're doing that in more than 8 months, right, because of the current situation. So we're very happy that this is happening today. We have a very exciting lineup of speakers. It's been with us the previous days of this week, and we will continue today and also tomorrow. And also thanks for coming specifically to this session, which will be on digital disbursements. What I'll try to cover first is macro level, at global level, what's happening in the digital disbursements world and some of the challenges that we've observed there. Then we will zoom in a little bit more into the APAC region, and I will go through a study that we published a few months ago. We present some insights and some consumer behavior preferences when it comes to payout methods and digital disbursements. And then I will also introduce briefly how Rapyd and Rapyd Disburse, in this case as a platform, can help address some of those challenges. Before we start, I'll also tell you a little bit about myself. So I'm Aitor, and I lead sales and business development for Rapyd in Asia Pacific. I've been in Singapore over 5 years. I joined Rapyd earlier this year. It's been about 8 months now. Prior to Rapyd, I spent time here in Singapore with Google, with Uber and Grab. And then prior to that, I also spent some time in Europe and the Americas with other IT and technology companies like Hewlett-Packard or IBM, always on the business side. So just a little bit about myself, and then without any further ado, and thanking again everyone for joining, I will start presenting a little bit some of the challenges that we've observed in the world of digital disbursements at global level. And the first thing that we need to understand is that cross-border volumes are on the rise. We're talking about a significant market. If we just look, for example, at the US, we're talking about a more than $12 trillion market. If we look at remittances, which is part of digital disbursements as well, we're talking about a $625 billion market. But then also at the same time, it's a huge market, but we can see that in some cases, the fees, the cost of a transaction, may go as high as 7% of the principal, which we would agree that paying 7% of the principal for a digital disbursement transaction seems to be on the high side. So that's definitely one of the challenges that we've observed. While volumes are on the rise, it's also true that scaling becomes complex. And why scaling becomes complex? Because at the end of the day, the nature of digital disbursements and cross-border disbursements is global, which means that companies may need to discuss with different vendors in every single country they operate in, have different agreements, and basically have this vendor orchestration globally, and have those conversations separately for every single vendor in every country they operate in. That also comes with increasing cost of operations, oversight. They need to look at what's happening in each of those markets, what's the regulatory framework, the regulations in each of those markets. And of course, it's also suboptimal scalability, right? Because at the end of the day, you need to have those conversations with all different vendors. They will also send you reporting, for example, in different formats. Reconciliation will be a challenge, and we hear that from some of our clients and the people that we talk to in the industry as well, how this is really a true challenge for companies, and the larger the company, the bigger the challenge, to the extent that we'll need to have dedicated people, and in some cases dedicated teams, to look at reconciliation reports from different vendors, right? Even sometimes from different transactions on your online banking application as well. So these are some of the challenges that we've observed at global level. And then, as I mentioned at the beginning, I'm also going to try to zoom in a little bit more into the Asia Pacific region and share some insights and some data points that we found in this report that we published a few months ago, which, by the way, is available on our website. So you just need to go there, and you can get the report for free as well. First thing that I will mention is the differences across the region, right? So I think it's no secret to any of us that Asia is a very diverse region, and also in terms of behaviors, right? And also in terms of consumer habits and consumer preferences. So when it comes to digital disbursements and new technologies, new billing technologies in particular, or new payout methods that have become available over time, we observe different trends happening in different markets. Right? And you can see here, for example, that more emerging markets like India or Indonesia or even Malaysia, they were seeing themselves as innovators, as early adopters, and willing to try new technologies. Whereas other markets more on the more developed side or on the mature side, like Japan or Taiwan, they were showing a little bit more, risk aversion, right? And probably some a bit more conservative and perhaps seeing themselves more as followers and not as much as trying a new technology or trying a new product for the first time. And why is this important? Because of the rise that we've seen in new payout methods and new technologies like real-time payments or e-wallets as well. So you can see that this was the case across the region. You can see on the left-hand side of the screen how some of these more emerging markets were seeing themselves as early adopters, as innovators, and willing to try new technologies, whereas on the right-hand side, like the more developed economies, they were showing more as followers and perhaps not as keen as trying new technologies first. Why we're sharing this? Because we think it's important, depending on the markets that you operate in, to understand the dynamics of the market, to understand consumer preferences, to understand consumer behaviors, and how their adoption may be with regards to these technologies or these new forms of, in this case, payout methods. And we will see, for example, that e-wallets will be an example of that. Similar thing happened with use of financial products and financial applications. In this survey, majority of the people acknowledged and responded that they had logged in, those who had a bank account, they had logged into their online banking at least once in the last month, sorry. But we also saw how e-wallet applications became very, very prominent in the survey. You can see in this chart on the right-hand side, like the green bars are e-wallets and the blue ones are credit and debit cards. So we can see how the green bars are above the blue ones in a lot of these more emerging markets like India or Indonesia, but also other markets that are more developed, right? Even within the emerging, like Malaysia or Thailand. And obviously the more developed ones like Singapore, Taiwan, or Japan, you can see that, of course, credit card usage is higher than e-wallets, but you can see that the numbers are not negligible, right? I mean, you can see that in the emerging markets are in the high 70s or 60s, and even in some of the more developed markets, it goes up to 50, 60%. So this is something that it shouldn't be ignored, right? And you can see here how almost 80% of Indians or 70% of Indonesians declared that they had logged into the e-wallet application at least once in the last month, which means that we can consider them monthly active users of those e-wallets. In the study, we also looked at the key considerations or the key factors that the respondents gave us, right, in the study as what is important to them when making or receiving a digital disbursement transaction. And no surprise, really, the usual suspects came up, right? I think nobody will be surprised to see here security, which was very important in cases like Taiwan, for example, or India, on the beneficiary side, interestingly, right? So yes, you wanted to receive the funds fast in a convenient way for you, but you also wanted to make sure that your data was secure and is not going to be compromised. Speed of transaction and cost, usual suspects here as well, particularly use cases like remittances. You would like to have access to your funds as immediate as possible, and you would like the cost of the transaction to be low. So this will become important for companies as well when they select vendors. And we see that in RFPs from large companies, and we see that as well from conversations that we have with our clients. Always these factors will come up. So this is also important when you look at your strategy around payouts, around digital disbursements globally, and cross-border payments overall, to look at these factors, and these are also relevant to the consumers in each of those markets. The last thing that I will mention about the study is also the preferences on the payout methods, right? So how would users, consumers, individuals in these markets would like to receive those funds and whether they prefer methods. Obviously, bank transfer is the legacy one, right? The more traditional one. But let's not forget that in this part of the world, there is a high unbanked population, particularly more in the emerging markets. A lot of those markets are neighboring us here in Singapore. So this is important to understand. That's why e-wallets as well have risen so much over the past few years in some of these markets, right? So a lot of these markets are mobile first, so users would like to have access to those applications immediately, and they would like to be able to transact and make transactions at convenience stores, at retail shops, split bills when they go for dinner with friends, remit funds back to their family in a different country. And that's why the increase of e-wallets that we've seen, right, over the past months and years in the region. And also because of the fact that cash is still prevalent, right, despite even the current situation in some of these markets, right? And we can see like 50% of people in some cases are used to receiving remittances and funds from their family residing abroad. And on the other end, they're used also to sending funds to their family, for example, the migrant worker community here in Singapore, in other places. They will remit funds back home to their families. In Thailand, for example, about a third of people receive their salaries in cash, which means that if you receive your salary in cash, it's likely that you're going to basically make transactions in cash as well, because that's how you receive the funds. You receive the funds in cash. So then when you go to the supermarket or you're going to make a transaction, you will also pay in cash. So we shouldn't really forget the fact that a lot of people in some of the more developed markets are receiving their salaries in cash, and therefore the propensity or the likelihood of them making other transactions in cash is going to be higher. So we're not just talking about bank transfers. I think we also need to take a look at what's happening in the e-wallet space and also how prevalent cash still is in some of the markets in the region. With that, I also mentioned that I wanted to touch briefly on use cases, and I will be highlighting 3, which we will revisit later when we talk about how Rapyd Disburse can help address some of the challenges and meet some of the requirements that come up with each of these use cases. The first one is a very traditional one, which is remittances, right? P2P remittances, the idea of one individual sending funds to another individual in a different country. Very traditional use case. Yet very relevant still today, right? Again, particularly migrant workers and other communities that are very used to sending these funds, right, cross-border. Speed and low-cost alternatives, these are the main factors they consider when choosing an option for a vendor or a shop to make that transfer, and also for companies that are in the remittance business to select partners and vendors as well. Why? Because at the end of the day, when you do a remittance, you basically want the receiver to have those funds immediately available or as close as possible to immediately available, and you want the cost of the transaction to be as low as possible. That's why it's always traditionally been a very competitive market with a lot of companies trying to cut rates, but also trying to look at the speed of the transaction as well, and the reliability of those transactions, as well as other factors as security, as we mentioned earlier as well. And then the other 2 cases will be more focused on the corporate side, right, on the business side of things. One will be business paying out consumers, or businesses sending funds to consumers, and this is normally done in high volume. You may think of use cases like insurance companies, for example, that need to pay out claims to their clients. In those cases, we will be talking about very high volume of transactions every month that needs to be scalable, right? It needs to be scalable, needs to be reliable, and you need to choose the payment methods that are more relevant to your clients. So in this example, loyalty is also a factor, right? Why is loyalty a factor? Because equal to equal, if I need to choose a provider, and as a consumer, one of the providers is offering me my preferred payment method, and they're going to be sending me funds, for example, claims that I make to my insurance company, I will be receiving them in my e-wallet because that's what I use on my day-to-day, then I might be more comfortable choosing that insurance company or that provider as opposed to the other one that is just going to offer me a bank transfer payment option, right? Payout option. So this is why loyalty is also tied into the different payout methods, in this case, that we offer consumers, in these cases of B2C, right? Companies paying out consumers. Companies paying out other companies is a very traditional use case, right? And probably the one that we normally get involved the most, given that we're in a corporate space. And this is all about companies paying suppliers, paying vendors, paying other companies in general, right? So here, scalability is important just because of the global nature of cross-border payouts, and also the fact that these companies tend to operate globally. And in the current world, really, I mean, your suppliers doesn't need to be in the same country that you are in most cases, right? So it's naturally a global ecosystem. And so then when you need to pay out your vendors and your suppliers, it becomes a challenge for many companies. So it needs to be scalable, and we alluded to that at the beginning on how scalability is an issue, it's a challenge at global level for many of these companies, given the fact that they will need to discuss terms, reconciliation, pricing, settlement with multiple vendors in each of the countries that they operate in, unless they have a single solution that they can use for that. So scalability, reliability, and reconciliation are the key factors that companies consider when they look at B2B payments. Hopefully, with this, we'll have set the context in terms of some of the challenges that we observe at global level around digital disbursements. Zooming in a little bit into the Asia-Pacific region, what are we seeing in the region, and what are some of those insights and data points that we found in the survey that we ran a few months ago and that we published, and again, it's available on our website. And then, what are some of the most common use cases around digital disbursements, right? So then, in the next part of the presentation, I will touch briefly on how we think Rapyd Disburse can help address some of these challenges and also some of these use cases. We'll keep this pretty high level, pretty brief, and then of course you will have my contact details at the end in case that anyone would like to go a little bit deeper on Rapyd Disburse capabilities. We think that Rapyd Disburse can help solve some of these challenges mainly because of these three factors. The first one is reach. We were mentioning that we're talking naturally about a global ecosystem, about companies and individuals having the need to access locally relevant payout methods in multiple countries. So with Rapyd Disburse, we're offering more than 900 payout methods in more than 100 countries. So that gives enough of a coverage in most cases for you to only have a single provider, a single platform that also offers a single integration, and it gives you access to a massive reach globally for you to offer those locally relevant payout methods to your consumers or to individuals. With that as well comes the speed. The speed to go when it comes to go to market, right? For companies that are expanding, companies that are launching new markets. If you're already integrated with a provider that can offer you local payment capabilities in your market, but also in the market that you're going to launch tomorrow, that means that you don't need to go again to that market and have conversations locally with other providers, other vendors, understand the regulatory framework, the compliance requirements and other regulations in that particular market, and discuss how the reconciliation reports are going to be sent to you, what is the format, how is the settlement going to work, what's the pricing, negotiate the pricing again. So that makes it basically when you've already done that with a single integration with a single provider, you can go to market faster. And this is critical for companies that are expanding and launching new markets. Otherwise, it might become a roadblock, and it may end up delaying the launch of that market with the corresponding business impact, right, and economic impact of that delay. Lastly, technology. Right? At the end of the day, we're also a technology company. We provide infrastructure. Some cases, the infrastructure is always been there. It's about how do we make the infrastructure better, right? And then not just infrastructure, about those rails, right, and the access to payout methods, but also, as I mentioned, right, regulatory framework, fraud management system, regulatory framework and compliance as well, not just the regulatory framework, compliance in some of those markets. So overall, it makes it easier for companies to tackle that challenge that we mentioned at the beginning of the orchestration of multiple vendors. Here, you just need one. The suboptimal scalability, because you will have different reconciliation reports and different discussions with different vendors. This is also minimized here. And then the access to technology as well. And we believe that doing so with single integration and a single API is critical to the success. Right? First, because you offer all those locally relevant payout methods in more than 100 countries, but also about efficiency and effectiveness. Why? Because you can still look at, as we mentioned, things like fraud management system, regulatory framework, compliance in the particular market, and then we're talking about KYCs, anti-money laundering. You can keep your experience local. You can customize your experience as well as part of the integration. And then ultimately, you provide end-to-end pricing, settlement, and reconciliation, which is critical in many cases. We also offer flexibility on how you do that. You may choose to fully integrate via API, or you may choose to do that on a web-based client portal, which is also very simple. I will show briefly what that looks like. That means that you also have a variety of options on how you want to do it. Do you want to keep control of your user interface and offer your full experience to your customers? You can do the full integration. You're not as concerned, not as sensitive to that, and you just want a simple integration that can go to market fast on an e-commerce, for example. You can do a hosted checkout integration, for example, or if the volumes are not high, you can just do it manually on the web-based portal. That will give you as well that automation that is required. And this is just an example of what that portal looks like. You can see that it's just a very simple web interface, and you will be able to create a must payout instruction just with a simple CSV file. that you will upload into the system, and then multiple instructions will be sent out. Just this very simple step will be a key differentiator if you compare that with some other companies that are doing this manually, or having someone accessing the online banking system and doing that transaction by transaction. Also with a propensity to error of somebody keying in manually all the information. So even if you don't do a full integration, you have other simpler ways to do that that will still give you the automation, the scalability that a lot of companies are looking for. Coming to the end of the presentation, I will touch briefly as well on the same use cases that I introduced a bit earlier and see how we think that Rapyd Disburse can help address them. First, I will start with the B2C case. As I mentioned, it is important to offer your consumers with their preferred local payout methods. They want to receive funds, if possible, in the payout methods that they use normally, an e-wallet, for example, or even cash. Some people may have, again, issues having access to a bank account, so they would like to receive a claim from an insurance company or a payout from a provider just by popping up into a convenience store and picking up the cash, as an example. Remittances, back to the use case again earlier, is all about the speed of the transaction and the cost of the transaction. So here again, having access to multiple rails globally through the same platform, in this case Rapyd Disburse, will give an edge to a lot of companies that are in this sector or where remittances is important to them, because it will give, again, the speed to market. They will not need to discuss the same terms and the same capabilities with different vendors in different markets. They will have access to those rails in a cost-effective manner as well. And lastly, and again, the use case that we see more often here at Rapyd, B2B payouts. So companies paying other companies, where the fact of having a single platform, a single integration, single reconciliation, end-to-end pricing and settlement becomes very important from a scalability point of view and a reconciliation point of view, and also having the right integration, a robust integration through a single API, it gives the reliability that they're also looking at. Just to wrap up on the Rapyd side and Rapyd Disburse, the unique differentiators that we believe on why Rapyd Disburse is different from other options that may be available in the market. First, as I mentioned, because of the reach. Global reach, more than 900 payout methods in more than 100 countries. Doing that, offering as well compliance and regulatory framework in the markets that we operate in, so that you don't have to worry about that. Single API integration, single platform that also sits on AWS, and that has implications on reliability, on scalability, on redundancy, as well as security. And then lastly, it's part of the overall Rapyd ecosystem. So it means that when you access the Rapyd ecosystem, you don't just access Rapyd Disburse, you also have access to Rapyd Collect, to Wallet, to FX management, even to issuing cards, physical cards or virtual cards. So it gives you access to that whole ecosystem that, for example, becomes very relevant for marketplaces. In the marketplace example, which by the way, there will be another session just after this one on marketplaces, so I will encourage you to stay if you have the time. Marketplaces collect funds from their clients, from their consumers, but they need to hold those funds, in wallets in this case, and disburse, pay out to their vendors, to their suppliers. This is also relevant, for example, in gig economy, where you need to pay delivery couriers, riders, right? And this type of parties that are part of the marketplace ecosystem. So that's where being connected to the Rapyd ecosystem becomes important, because you don't just get access to payouts, you get access to everything else. So that's the summary. I hope that you found that useful, understanding first like some of the global challenges that we see around digital disbursements globally, understanding as well consumer behavior and consumer preferences in Asia Pacific, and then lastly, how we think Rapyd can help address some of those challenges. So with that, I'll wrap up the session. I thank you very much for your time and for coming here. I will encourage you to keep participating in Singapore Fintech Festival throughout the week. And if you have any questions and would like to go deeper in any of the topics that I just presented, feel free to drop me an email and I'll get back to you. Thanks again, everyone, for your time.